Chapter 46. Aggressive Changes. Naira checked her watch again. It took only a few minutes for the purple haze to disperse, but not from any built-in ventilation in the room. Rather, as it wafted out of the crystal, it circled up into Paddock's face. The more he changed, the faster the flow became, until it seemed that the gas was forcing itself into Paddock and choking his screams. His eyes were alight with prismatic glow, though it favored colors of a deeper hue, a sign of fractal use rather than pure, uncut prism. The chair beneath him rocked as his body swelled, arms bulging against their restraints. His snout, once short and chubby, now elongated by several inches, pulling the skin of his lips back and exposing coffee-stained teeth. His teeth were growing longer, something Naira only noticed because a ring of clean white showed at the base of each tooth as they pushed further from his gums. As the last of the reaction disappeared into him, his foot slammed down on the ground once, twice, 3 times as he strained to pull out of his chair. At last, he slumped, sinking into the chair with aggravated gasps. All around her, the gathered Sneppards wrote notes on their clipboards as they exchanged quiet whispers. With everything they'd come to see now seemingly complete, the crowd dissipated, splitting off in groups of 2 or 3. Their continued discussion of what they just witnessed left them disturbingly unbothered, several of them even making plans to go on lunch. What? Wasn't this a member of the 13? Shouldn't this be a huge deal? Was this how little people had cared any time they heard the news that Solatra had killed another one? It wasn't long before Naira was left alone in the hall outside Paddock's cell. Finally, she had a chance at some answers. After taking a moment to confirm she was truly alone, she strode up and unlocked the cell door. Opening it brought her a whiff of necrum mixed with formaldehyde mixed with something somehow less pleasant than both of those. It was the same kind of scent she'd been exposed to down beneath the prison when they'd fought off those monsters. What sort of taboo alchemy had Bradburn discovered, and since when had he been involved in alchemy? She'd always assumed he left that to her and her old friends. Oh. It was obvious then. He'd used someone else to make this. Dravota, perhaps? Or Tazale? She hoped her son wasn't involved in this, but his scent was down here. Maybe Bradburn had forced Forohana to concoct this new horrible thing, then killed her to hide the evidence? Stepping into the room, she shut the door behind her, but left it open by a crack. No sense in locking herself in with a monster. Paddock sagged in his chair. Discarded crystal fragments lay scattered on the floor around him, like metal shavings mapping out a magnetic field. His breathing was erratic, and his previously saggy skin had stretched and filled out with bulk that the chair miraculously still supported. Like a child getting into the cookie jar while the parent's back was turned, Naira crept forward and collected several larger crystal fragments. A quick sniff confirmed they were the source of the odor in the room, and she stored them carefully in a pouch in her alchemy bag. She'd take them back to Ame's lab for testing. "Kill me," Paddock muttered. Caught off guard, Naira shot to her feet, hand instinctively fishing for a prism canister. But Paddock hadn't moved. He wasn't even looking at her. His prismatic eyes simply stared down at a random point on the floor. Grabbing an electrum crystal just in case, Naira took a cautious step forward. "Why would I do that?" As if her voice was the key to unlocking his stupor, Paddock's eyes looked up to meet hers. They were dull behind the glow, managing to look both dangerous and weary all at once. When he spoke again, his voice was raspy, like he'd swallowed acid. "I don't want to go native." Nose twitching at the term, Naira crouched down across from him, staying just out of his arm's reach. "One is born native outside the bulb. Then you must grow into it. If they are raised inside a bulb, it is lost. Adults don't become native. Their opportunity for it is lost." "I feel myself slipping away," Paddock moaned. "Just end me before it takes hold." "I think you're being a little dramatic." Naira said, though it was clear from looking at him that he had just gone through some physical changes. Was it over? Or was there still more to come?
You won't kill me, then at least help me get out of here. I need a doctor.
He winced as he tested the restraints again. His face twitched as he scowled with lips that wouldn't fully close. After a moment of groaning at whatever he was feeling, he continued,
I'm rich. I can make you rich in return.
I don't want money. I want answers. Paddock snorted, and the glow in his eyes flared momentarily, though he didn't seem angry, just surprised.
Who in their right mind doesn't want money?
Someone who finds value outside of material things, Naira replied evenly. He scrutinized her then, and for the first time seemed to really see her.
You're a native?
He asked, voice carrying such amazement she wanted to slap him, though she doubted it would do anything other than make her feel better. With a sigh, Naira replied, I just explained it. I'm not. I was born outside the bulb, but I was rescued before the point of actually becoming native. I've spent almost my whole life in sci-fi. I'm an elf, yes, but I'm not a native.
Are you one of Walter's pets?
Naira bristled at that, her fingers clenching empty air. I've done work for Bradburn before, but not for a while.
You're his alchemist. You're the one who helped him do this to me.
His breathing was turning to wheezing. Shaking her head, Naira said, I'm not the one who made this, but I might be able to figure out what they did, maybe even how to treat it, if you answer my questions. If Necrom was involved on the level she'd seen filling the room, then she doubted there was much hope of saving his insides. He was either dying or turning into something awful, and she needed answers while he could give them. His entire head rocked as he took a heavy breath through his nose.
I'll tell you whatever you want to know. Just stop this before it kills me.
Naira wasn't sure she knew how to do that, but she nodded anyway. Answers were top priority right now. My name is Naira. I used to be Selatra. Some call me the Alchemancer. I'm the one who's been killing members of the 13.
So you are here to kill me,
Paddock wheezed, his voice cracking mid-sentence as he took another heavy breath. His eyes were growing duller by the moment. No, I was made to kill them. Someone took my family and sent me instructions on where and when to kill the other 13. Was it you? Through fading, yet darting eyes, Paddock shook his head.
I don't have any idea who you are. Your name isn't familiar to me.
That wasn't surprising. That left one other primary suspect. Was it Bradburn? She asked.
Probably,
Paddock said, groaning as a spasm rocked his body. His lips drew back a little further from each other.
There's a lot that Walter's been doing in secret from me. But the plan to reduce the 13 was one we created together. I agreed to help him into the ranks if he helped me lower the 13 to the point where we could invoke emergency powers. I didn't care how he did it, or when he did it. The timeline and method were both in his court. If he used you, then he used you. But he never told me the specifics. Better for deniability.
She'd long guessed the murders were a power grab, but it was a relief to hear someone finally admit it. Maybe it was cynical of her, but she wasn't surprised to see how quickly those with power and influence turned on each other. Tapping her thumb against her thigh, a plan wormed its way into her head, one as stupid and risky as the time she'd spared Renetta. Only, unlike Renetta, this man probably deserved whatever was happening to him. If I help you, can you help me get my family back from Bradburn? He nodded way too quickly, his words slurring as he muttered,
Yes, of course I can. I own the police. Anything Walter has I can seize, especially after the past few days.
Days? How quickly was Bradburn moving? Making the second attempt on Renetta's life, then following up by experimenting on his own boss? All within a few weeks of Naira killing just enough 13 for the power balance to shift drastically? It seemed like the definition of a hostile takeover. Nevertheless, if this man could help, even if he was likely a pathetic crook, she had to try. It felt like aligning with the lesser of two evils, which was hardly comforting, but she needed powerful allies right now. Trusting her gut, despite the clenching of her stomach, Naira nodded. All right, I'll get you out. Raising the prism canister to her lips, she bit down and inhaled. As she felt the familiar, welcome sensation of it entering her system, Paddock's lethargy disappeared. His eye shot up to her, now almost fully glazed behind the prismatic glow, and his lips curled back as he snarled. The chair beneath him rocked, and the restraints creaked as he tried to leap for her. There was so much force behind it that he lost his balance, and the chair tipped forward, smashing first his knees, then his face into the concrete. Alarmed, Naira took several steps back, prepared to snap an electrum crystal if he tried anything else.
Need it,
He groaned, head dragging along the ground as he tried to get back on his knees. Blood ran freely from his nose and smeared on the floor, and Naira could swear that there was a rainbow sheen to the liquid.
Give it,
He growled, turning his head to stare at her with dull, feral eyes.
What? I see what you have. I can taste it. I need it,
He snarled, successfully finding his way to his knees. The restraints made a stretching sound as he pulled against them with strength he hadn't shown a minute ago. When they'd fought those creatures under the prison, they'd gone after the prism users. Somehow, they'd leached them of their prism. Was that what this did? Is that what he thought he needed? Pulling a prism canister from her bag, she walked toward him with caution appropriate to approaching a wild animal. It's stored in these. All you have to do is bite into the tip and inhale. She held it out for him, and he lunged for it. Drawing her hand back, she avoided being bitten, but the canister went skittering across the floor. Paddock landed on his face again, then scooted awkwardly after the canister. Naira followed, intending to pick it up for him, but he crawled with the desperation of a mouse who had caught only their tail in a trap. Before she could grab it, he was already on it, and with no hesitation or care, he bit into the center of the canister. His mouth exploded in a spray of prism and blood. Shrapnel bounced off the nearby concrete walls and floor. Naira gasped as a fiery sensation shot up her leg where a piece of stray metal embedded itself. She'd never known anyone with a bite strong enough to punch through the body of a prism canister. She realized now, people probably had the jaw strength, she'd just never met anyone stupid enough to commit to it. And for good reason. Her leg stung where a fresh rivulet of blood weaved its way down through the fur. But what of Paddock? Glancing at him, she braced for the worst, and received it, at least in part. Gashes split large sections of his mouth, and his tongue was partly severed. Bits of metal peppered his lip, his tongue, and the roof of his mouth. Blood poured freely onto the floor, leaving his body to the tunes of hundreds of cc's per second. And yet, his breathing normalized. Behind the prismatic glow, the definition started returning to his eyes. What in Fanina was happening? His mouth closed for a few moments, and when he opened it again, he spat out shards of metal. The inside of his mouth began to glow, and to Naira's astonishment, the blood flow slowed, then stopped. Where on Fanatom had he found Curum? Yes, saliva was a natural alchemantic healing reagent, but not on the scale he just demonstrated. As the glow in his mouth faded, so too did the definition in his eyes. Did he need more prism, then? Not giving him a chance to freak out on her again, Naira produced another prism canister and inserted the tip between his teeth. Bite down and inhale, she ordered in her teaching voice. He did so, and again the definition returned to his eyes.
What?
He began, in a voice that wasn't nearly as raspy anymore.
What just happened to me?
I don't know, Naira admitted, fishing for yet another prism canister while checking his face. There was no doubt it was starting to heal. But how? Unfortunately, that wasn't a question for right now. Right now, she needed to get him out of here. Giving him another dose of prism, she set to work on his restraints. The prism seemed to revitalize him, and after a few shaking breaths of it, he was able to help. Getting him to his feet, he made it to the door without much trouble. Though the prism was toning down the effects of his transformation, it couldn't hide everything. He still looked unnaturally stretched in far too many areas. His eyes held fire as Naira joined him at the door.
Get me out of here. You'll get whatever you want, and Walter's gonna get what's coming to him.
Music to her ears. With a quick nod, her hand gripped the doorknob. It twisted in her grasp as someone opened it from the other side. Naira looked up to see a sneppered guard in a Lortran vest standing in the doorway. His hand drifted to the baton holstered at his hip as a second guard peeked in over his shoulder. "You ain't on the cleanup crew, sweetheart," he said. Well then, that killed any part of Naira's mood that might have sought a peaceful or subtle resolution to this encounter. More guards hovered out in the hall. Bradburn's goons in front of her, a partly feral Paddock behind her. Great. Guard number 1 stepped into the room, and his partner stepped in behind him. Holster buckles unbuttoned with practiced flicks of the thumb. Naira's hand shot down into her bag, and she chomped into a prism canister. Leaping backwards saved her from the first swing of an electron baton. It crackled in anger at missing its target. Well, it wasn't the only thing wanting to discharge. Flinging the prism canister to the side, she ducked as the guard stepped into a follow-up swing. Her fingers cracked the electrum crystal she still nursed in her palm, and she flung a burst of electricity at the guard. He was too close to miss, and blue arcs coursed through his body. His partner charged forward with a wild vertical swing, which Naira sidestepped. She punished him with a haymaker to the temple. There were smarter ways to punch people, but the man had left himself wide open, and Naira didn't have time to worry about anything other than making her hits count. Stumbling away, the second guard leaned into the wall to steady himself as he clutched at his head. Without slowing down, Naira threw her weight into him, her focus entirely on wrestling the electrum baton away from him. She was successful, and drove it into his neck a moment later, before letting him slide down the wall. The first guard had collapsed to a knee and now gasped for breath. It was about to get worse for him before it got better. Unfortunately, before she could introduce him to his own shock baton, 3 more guards pushed through the door. Settling for a kick to the man's clavicle that sent him to the ground, her hand shot down into her bag for new crystals. All 3 of the new guards drew handguns and barked at her to surrender. Yeah, that was a problem. Paddock's chair sailed overhead, crashing into one of the guards and splintering as it smashed him into the wall. Paddock rushed past her, showing renewed strength as he leapt at the guards. The 2 still standing opened fire, and 2 more guards filed in behind them. Blood sprayed from Paddock as bullet after bullet punched through his skin, but the man didn't slow. If anything, the damage seemed to make him more feral. Gripping one guard's head in an impressively meaty hand, his teeth sank in around the man's neck with an audible crunch. The guard went limp in his grasp. Naira ducked to the side on instinct, feeling in her bag for something appropriately large. 2 crystals came away in her grip, and she cracked them both the moment they were free of the bag. Aurum and Electrum. Not a traditional pairing, but the chorus of guns and the monster in the room didn't give her time to be picky. Cradling the Electrum reaction for a few seconds, a wave of her arm flung a gust of wind into the closest guard, throwing him off balance and sending his shots wide as he stumbled into the path of his ally. This let Naira follow up with the stored Electrum, and she shot a burst of electricity their way. Neither was close enough to receive full potency, but it was enough of a zap to lock them both in place for a moment. Paddock's claws grew as thick as Naira's fingers as he carved into the next closest guard. All guns in the room were focused on him, and the small space was turning into an echo chamber. Spent firearm and burnt flesh graced Naira's nose in equal measure. Multiple sneppered ears laid flat at the cacophony, but with Paddock flinging gore with every swing of his arms, it was no wonder they kept shooting. Even more frightening was what they hadn't noticed. Bullets rattled to the floor as Paddock's own body simply rejected them. Fyram's scorch marks slowly healing around each bullet hole. His body was recovering, but his eyes... Seed Mother, the man's eyes were dulling again. He must have been burning prism at an incredible rate. He'd stopped using words after the first few bullets, which was also concerning. The way he acted now was just like those things beneath the prison. He looked different, obviously, since he started as a rotund snipperd. But the eyes were the same, the deformities were similar, and the brutality with which he tore into people was frighteningly identical. There were only a few guards left standing before it would just be him and Naira in the room. If she didn't calm him down by then. She re-upped her prism, her breath catching in her throat as Paddock wheeled on her immediately. His legs tensed to pounce, and his extended teeth and claws ran red with sneppered blood. What saved her was the fact that the guards never stopped shooting. Yes, these creatures hungered for prism, but they also seemed to understand basic threat assessment. So while he looked ready to jump her, he instead leapt for the next closest gun-wielding guard. Seed Mother. Naira hoped she had enough supplies to deal with him. She was fairly confident she could kill him if necessary, but the whole point was to get him out alive. She had Tarim, and she had Prism, but did she have enough? Another flurry of claws left the next guard in 2 loosely connected pieces on the floor. That left 4 dead, 2 more unconscious where Naira had left them, and 2 still shooting. It had only been 1, maybe 2 minutes since they'd been found. If she didn't do something now, more people were going to die. She needed to capture Paddock's attention and hold it. Grabbing an Aurum crystal in each hand, she cracked them both. She focused on the space between guards before sweeping her hands apart like she was sliding open a set of curtains. A rush of air blasted both guards, throwing them both towards opposite corners of the room. Not a moment too soon, as Paddock's claws sailed through the spot where one of the guards had just been. "If you don't want to die," Naira shouted, "stop shooting and stay the fanina out of the way!" Dazed as they were by everything going on around them, her words seemed to sober up the guards. While they insisted on recovering their guns and training them on Paddock, they did at least hold their fire. How did you distract an angry deerhound? By giving it something to chase. Discarding the spent Aurum, Naira prepped an Electrum crystal. "Hey! Paddock!" she yelled. He didn't look at her right away, so she cracked the crystal and shocked him. That earned her his full attention, and he turned to her with a roar. She zapped him again, locking him in place and giving her a few seconds head start as she sprinted out of the door. She'd made it maybe 10 feet down the hall when she heard Paddock collide with the wall as he barreled after her. Yes, deerhounds loved to chase rabbits, but what deerhound could catch lightning? Keeping his attention wasn't as hard as she'd feared. It was her prism he wanted, so she couldn't let too much escape in her breathing as she ran. She still had to run full tilt, though, as more than once he caught up to her on straightaways. The combination of opportune Electrum blasts as he pounced, and Aurum waves to shift her own momentum and push her out of reach were all that kept him from catching her. More guards spilled into the underground hallways, and with them came more guns. The guard outfit Naira still wore saved her from being shot. With a literal monster on her tail, the guards ignored her as she ran past and concentrated their fire on Paddock. They must have heard the shooting earlier, because these new guards had automatic weaponry. Spent bullet casings rained down to the floor, and still Paddock kept coming. Paddock's elongated hands came up to shield his face. Bullets punched through his arms and torso, spraying the walls and floor red with blood. He roared, and the blood shifted from red to off-white before evaporating altogether. Naira felt the Aurum reaction on the periphery of her senses, though she had no time to direct it in any way. An Aurum burst exploded in the center of the squad of guards, flinging sneppards in all directions. The gunfire immediately ceased. Paddock leapt onto the guards, a frenzy of tearing and slicing with tooth and claw. Naira slowed to a stop, unable to comprehend what she'd just seen. Things were clicking into place in her mind, but the implications were terrifying. Monster Paddock had just used its own blood as the reagent for an Aurum reaction. Had he copied what he'd seen, or perhaps felt her do back in his cell? That still didn't explain the rapid healing either. Everyone's blood carried one of the major elements. It would have made sense to assume his was Curum, but now Aurum, too? It had to come from somewhere. Either he'd been able to store some aurum when she'd used it in the cell, or more likely, he'd used his own blood. His eyes were dull with prismatic glow, his features horribly disfigured and elongated as he continued to eviscerate the squad. Even so, he was slowing. Blood streamed from holes in his body that no longer healed. Most were healing, but some simply weren't. In a macabre way, it made sense. This creature could use Prism and its own blood to cast magic. That was obvious, but the more he used, the more his judgment was impaired, and the more feral he became. That was the danger of using your own blood as a reagent. You only had so much, and using it for alchemical reactions spent it as easily and fully as any other reagent. Any time he used his blood to heal, the wounds might close, but he wouldn't get the blood back. It was a terrible, self-feeding cycle that would lead to anemia and death. The real question was, how far gone was he? He'd been coherent until he'd been shot. Then instinct had taken over, and he'd spent prism and blood to heal himself. So if she restored his prism, then maybe? Reaching into her bag, she cracked literal fistfuls of tarum before stuffing them in her outfit pockets. Then she took a fresh dose of prism. That pulled his attention away from his most recent massacre. The last guard's body slid from his slick claws and slumped lifeless to the ground. She only had 5 prism canisters left. Let it be enough. Paddock stalked forward, not acting in any pain, though his body was clearly not responding as fully as it should. Blood clung to every part of him, leaving horrific trails with every dragging step. Though his eyes had gone dull behind the prismatic glow, she caught hints of green growing in them as he approached her. Prepping an electrum crystal in her free hand, she held out a prism canister with the other. She forced calm into her voice as she called, "I'm not going to hurt you, Paddock, as long as you don't try to hurt me. You can have some prism if you take it nicely." The tarum in the air was already affecting her, and she felt her confidence growing in the ensuing calm. Thank Seed Mother, it seemed to be affecting him, too. He slowed, limping nearer on all fours, eyes fixed lifelessly on the canister in her hand. He lashed out with both hands, claws biting into the back of Naira's arm and hand and smearing them with blood, most of which was not her own. She jerked reflexively in pain, releasing the canister, which Paddock promptly stuck completely in his mouth. "Wait, wait!" Naira urged, using her prism to amplify the tarum's effect as she held up her hand. "Remember, it hurt to do that last time. Don't bite the whole thing. Bite the..." Paddock watched her, then bit into the container anyway. It ruptured with a loud pop, but by some miracle didn't fully explode like last time. If it hurt, Paddock didn't seem to care. As the prism entered his system, some definition returned to his eyes, but one canister clearly wasn't enough. She gave him another, and this time she successfully convinced him to bite just the tip. His bleeding continued, but his breathing and posture both improved. Some of the unnatural stretching even reduced. After a third dose, his eyes had regained enough definition to register recognition, and by the 4th dose, he was able to speak. His voice wavered. "What the Fanina is wrong with me?" He glanced down at his hands and arms, which trembled. Holes perforated them, and he was truly coated head to toe in blood. "Seed Mother, I've gone native." "No," Naira snapped. "I don't know what Bradburn's done to change you, but he can't make someone a native." "Anima spawn, then." Naira hesitated. That was certainly where her mind had gone. "It doesn't matter," she said. "Can you walk?" Paddock's hands continued to shake, with a tremble that extended down into his legs. "Everything hurts. I feel lightheaded, like I need to vomit." "It's not surprising. You've been shot a lot. Bradburn's men want you dead." "I feel dead already. He cut off, lurching forward and retching. Blood and bile spilled out like someone was pouring them from a bucket. That was a frightful amount of liquid to lose. He was far too pale now, his skin settling somewhere near an ashen gray. Naira put an arm under his shoulder. Come on, we need to get you out of here. He was standing under his own weight, but barely. If he couldn't walk, she wouldn't be able to carry him. Behind his back, she cracked a Curum crystal and visualized more of those holes in his body closing. Deep down, she knew it wouldn't be enough. There was only so much punishment a body could take before breaking forever, but she still had to try. Let's go, she said, urging him forward. After a few moments of ragged breathing, Paddock took a step. His leg nearly buckled, and he cried out in pain. His teeth ground together, and to his credit, he forced himself to take another step, then another. That's it, Naira encouraged. One step at a time. Come on, elevator's just around the corner. Chapter 47. Coalescence. Leo paused just long enough to line up the shot. Any prism in his system had long since been burned, and the gunshot that followed sounded muffled. It wasn't truly muffled. His senses were just returning to normal. Thankfully, he didn't need Prism to aim, and his shot hit his mark. The Aurum crystal he'd thrown shattered mid-flight, almost perfectly centered in the group of pursuing guards. The explosion of pressure sent guards into the wall and sliding across the floor. Almost as one, they each clutched at their ears, the pressing pain over whatever bruising they just sustained. It had been a gamble to save the crystal for this late in the chase, but it had paid off. The exit was just ahead, and he'd been shot at a few times getting to this point, but hadn't actually taken any hits. Thankfully, the worst he'd done was wing one guard in the shoulder and another in the arm. Just because they were working for the worst person in the bulb didn't mean they should have to die in his service. Leo was halfway to the final door when the elevator dinged behind him. He wheeled, leveling his gun and bracing for one last firefight. The doors opened, and a Nulf in Lortran security garb stumbled forward, supporting a heavy-set but haggard Sneppard with multiple gunshot wounds. It was Naira, and she'd apparently found... Oh, Seed Mother. That was Robert Paddock on her shoulder. Naira called out to him, but he was already running to her side to take Paddock's other shoulder. This is a rescue now? Leo asked, his chest still heaving from the last few minutes of pure cardio. It's like under the prison, she replied, sounding similarly winded. Things in the dark need to be brought into the light. Naira's eyes remained forward. Paddock had bled all over her, and it was running down her clothes and through her fur, but she had the focus of a soldier. As for Paddock himself, the man was pale and felt very close to dead weight as he staggered along with them. Blood spilled from multiple holes in his body and coated everything around his mouth and hands. What sort of fanina had these two just crawled out of? They stumbled awkwardly through the glass exit doors, which were not meant for 3 people to pass at a time. Blood and clumps of fur smeared and stuck to the glass as they squeezed through. Both Naira and Leo tried to pick up Paddock's pace, but he was in a different weight class, and moving him faster was like 2 children trying to drag their parent through a store. Firearm engines roared to life in the parking lot. Leo's cruiser wasn't too far away, but it was still at least a couple 100 feet to go. Glancing towards the noise, Leo saw several cars activating repulsors and heading their way. On a good day, Leo wasn't confident in his ability to dodge a speeding car, but with someone in Paddock's condition in tow? Fanina, even the closest parked cars were a good 20-second sprint away, so reaching cover fast enough wasn't really an option. If those cars reached him, they'd be roadkill. He still had 7 shots left in the Edwest, plus a spare magazine. If the windshields weren't bullet-resistant glass, then there was a chance they survived this. Can you take him for a second? Naira asked. He'd been about to ask her the same thing so he could free up his shooting hand. Something about her eyes made him retract his own offer. She clearly had a plan, and it was guaranteed to be more effective than his. So he shifted his weight to support Paddock better. Yeah, I got him. Then get him to the car. Stepping around them, Naira put herself directly in the path of any incoming vehicles. After spending a moment to take more prism, she tossed the empty canister aside. Selecting a crystal in each hand, she took a ready stance and faced the danger head on. Whatever was about to happen, Tolson was going to be sad he missed it. Naira looked every bit the calm hero facing down the charging dragon with nothing but a small sword. Come on, Leo urged, tugging Paddock forward. Naira was buying them time, so he wouldn't waste it. Even as he kept moving, he couldn't stop himself from looking back. He had to watch the Alchemancer at work. 2 cars pulled out and angled towards Naira. Her fists clenched, and her prism-coated eyes remained fixed on her targets. Only a few seconds before the first car reached her, Naira flung something large under it and raised her hand high. An aurum burst sounded off, and the car was flung up and onto its side. Its momentum and active thrusters continued to carry it forward, even as it scraped along the metal street with an ear-splitting screech that put claws on chalkboards to shame. The car rotated as if twisted by an unseen hand. Naira herself twisted to plant her hands on the vehicle's undercarriage and literally exploded with lightning. Blue electricity shot out in all directions, and the car's repulsors flared. The other car tried to drive around it, but the repulsors pulled it in, sticking both cars together and pulling them careening off to the side. Naira barely dodged the collision with an aurum-assisted leap. Before she reached the ground, more electricity sparked from the sliding vehicles, and she brought her hands together. The repulsor's flare increased, crunching the top of one car with the body of the other. Firearm thrusters carried the whole mess into a waiting line of parked cars that only mostly slowed its momentum. Naira landed on the street in a crouch as the prism in her eyes fully faded. She got to her feet a bit shakily, and Leo watched her visibly gasp for breath. And with a quick shake of her head, she started jogging over to join them. She didn't see the third car pulling out. "Behind you!" Leo called. Naira responded quickly, whipping around to assess the threat. Her hand shot down into her bag and came back empty. She didn't take more prism. If she had a crystal, it was too small for Leo to see. And yet, she still squared off like last time, like she intended to play chicken with a speeding car. Finally reaching the first parked car, Leo shrugged off Paddock, pushing him towards the car. It was his turn. "Sorry," he muttered. "It's just for a minute." Not even bothering to see if the man had stayed upright, Leo spun and drew the Ed West. Allowing himself only a few seconds to steady his aim, he fired. The first bullet cracked the windshield at the driver's eye level. The second bullet widened the crack. Again and again, Leo fired until he'd emptied the magazine. The windshield never shattered, but the driver panicked anyway, and the car veered off course, missing Naira, who simply sidestepped, before it too crashed into a line of parked cars. Not one to gawk, Naira rushed over as Leo reloaded. She gave him a quick nod as she bounded up. "Thanks." Leo returned the nod, then moved to help her with Paddock. The large man had left a fresh smear of blood on the car Leo had used to keep him upright, and he looked ready to collapse. Together, they got him to Leo's cruiser, laying him out in the back seat with great difficulty. The black interior would forever be stained red. Naira climbed in with him. Leo hopped into the driver's seat and had the car started and moving in record time. Motion in the rearview mirror caught his eye as Bradburn's new office disappeared from view. It was Naira, trying her best to treat Paddock's wounds by conventional means. "Do you still have any prism?" she asked as she started tearing into Paddock's shirt. "Sorry," Leo said. "I had to use it to get out." Naira swore under her breath. The fact that Leo caught it was a sign that all the explosions and gunfire hadn't ruined his hearing. That was at least a positive. "He gonna make it?" he asked. There was no response. Leo turned onto the next street, keeping the accelerator floored. His eyes darted between his mirrors, expecting to see vehicles in pursuit at any moment. But every new turn seemed to say that maybe, just maybe, they were out of danger. An unpleasant gurgle sounded from the back before someone tapped him on the shoulder. Leo's eyes flicked up to his rearview mirror. Paddock had a meaty, bloody hand around Naira's throat. Oh, Fanina. Leo reversed the thrusters, throwing him forward in his seatbelt and causing several thumps in the back. Naira gasped for breath. Her bag rustled as crystals clinked together, and moments later, a pleasant scent filled the car. Twisting against his seatbelt, Leo glanced back at his passengers. "Everyone okay?" Only Paddock's bulk had kept him from sliding off the seat. He was too big to fit into the gap by the floorboards. Naira had wrapped up several wounds, but he was barely moving anymore. How he had found the strength to strangle her was a mystery. Quite guardedly, Naira stuffed a collection of cracked Tarum crystals into the tattered remains of Paddock's shirt. "I can't save him," she said quietly. "All I can do is help him pass peacefully." "You sure you're safe back there?" "He just caught me off guard. I didn't think he had any strength left. It won't happen again." "Need anything from me?" She shook her head. "Just drive." That he could do. Leo watched Naira pull the sheet over Paddock's face. He'd never really cared for the guy, but still, what an awful way for anyone to go. "It's like the things below the prison," Moira said quietly from her stool. It hadn't been Leo's first choice to invite the kits in to see the body, but he'd been solidly outvoted. They'd gathered everyone who'd survived the prison ordeal, along with other key people around here, namely Renetta Dolahan, her head of security Marston, and their host, Ame. Even Sergei, the Dolahans' family driver, was gathered around the large table in Ame's garage, and he squeezed Moira's shoulder in encouragement. Naira folded her arms, turning to address the group. "He wasn't like that when I found him. Bradburn changed him while I watched." Renetta was the first to speak. How? It was the question they all had. Fishing into a pocket, Naira pulled out a small plastic bag with purple crystalline fragments. "Alchemy. Some sort of necrom reaction with a chemical agent Ame and I haven't been able to discern. He made Paddock breathe in the gas from this, and the transformation started almost immediately." Melissa spoke up from her seat beside Leo. "Did he behave like the monsters from the prison?" Naira grimaced. "Eventually, though it took some time to get there. He killed close to a dozen people on our way out, with the same savagery as the creatures we faced before." "So how'd we even get him to the car?" Leo asked. "He had plenty of opportunities to attack me, but he didn't. At least until he attacked you in the back seat." "Because he saw me as a source of prism." Leo frowned. "But you were out of prism at that point. I watched you use it all on those cars." Let me restate, then. Naira gave the plastic bag a shake. "Whatever this is, created some kind of dependency in Paddock. I took Prism while I was freeing him, and he lunged at me immediately. Said he needed it. When I gave him some, he calmed down. Later on, in the elevator, he asked for more, and specifically said, 'I feel like I can't breathe.'" Ame interjected, finger tapping her muzzle as she thought out loud. "Prism is just concentrated air taken from outside the bulb. It's laden with the same magic that infuses and powers this whole world. But at the end of the day, it's still just air." "Exactly where my mind went," Naira said with a nod. "But he was burning through it too fast. And that's the frightening part. He was using it to heal." "Had you given him any crystals?" Rolf asked. Naira shook her head. "Blood magic," Ame muttered, going unnoticed by the Nulfs in the room, while every Snipper's ears shot up. "I'm sorry, did you just say blood magic?" Moira asked. Beside him, Melissa perked up in her seat. "The car fire," she whispered. The look in her eyes told Leo something had just clicked for her. He nearly asked, but her attention was solely focused on Naira. Shooting a look of annoyance at their host, Naira sighed. "When you don't have crystals prepared, blood can be used as an emergency reagent." There was extra emphasis on the word emergency, and her gaze was focused on the kits in the circle. "Any blood used is spent by the reaction, so it's blood your body doesn't get back. In small amounts, not a big deal, but it's really easy to use too much without even realizing it. It's the primary reason this man died. He instinctively spent his own blood to cure his wounds, but he had too many wounds to fix and spent far too much blood to recover." Moira's hand shot up. you said before that blood was a key ingredient for making necrum. What else can you use it for? Everyone on Fenitum is born with an elemental affinity in their blood. When you prepare blood in a crystal, you make necrum. But if you cast using the raw blood, the resultant reaction follows your affinity. For example, mine is electrum. Melissa's tail flicked into Leo's. He glanced at her, but she wasn't annoyed. Her face was radiant with realization as she whispered, I knew it. Now it was Naomi's turn to ask a question. How do you know what your affinity is? Next time you start bleeding while there's prism in your system, just do what comes naturally, and you'll figure it out right away. Though, if you're looking for an easier indication, Naira brought a finger up to tap beside her eye. Iris color seems to correlate with affinity. There's not enough data to prove that, but those of us who've studied alchemancy have noticed a trend. Ame snorted from her wheelchair. It was 100% correlation within our old group, which is a small sample size to base such a large claim on. Not like we don't have a large group to sample now, Ame said, gesturing at the gathered crowd. Naira scowled, and Leo could feel the war between her inner teacher and her inner scientist. Not that he blamed her. As eager as the kits around here were to use magic, telling them that their own blood was magic was a dangerous Pandora's box to present them. Glancing at where the three were huddled together, it was evident their little minds were exploding with possibilities. The twitching of their whiskers, the clipped movements of their tails, and the general fidgeting all gave them away. Can we test it? Moira asked. This drew a sigh from Naira. Yes, we can test it. You don't need much blood to test it, right, love? Renata asked. I won't drain your daughter dry. That is reassuring, Renata said in a measured voice. But I was actually interested in being tested myself. Naira drew in a deep breath, her voice having to push around it to escape. Yeah, okay, sure. We'll test everyone. Leo felt like he was watching a parent tell children to take just one piece of candy from the bowl, only to have the children fall into a frenzy. Indeed, the teens were already chatting in hushed tones. He didn't envy Naira's holding of the floor. Before she could continue, Moira spoke up. That's why those things drained us of prism in the prison, then? They needed it to breathe? Naira nodded. So it would seem. So we could have saved them? The room fell silent. From everything Leo had heard, the fight beneath the prison had been a life or death affair. What the survivors had described didn't sound like they could have been saved. And yet, despite the horror she must have experienced down there, the kit looked suddenly sorrowful. The silence stretched on as more eyes settled on Naira. After a long moment's consideration, she gave a small shrug. If we'd had enough prism, maybe. The truth is, we don't know how much of this works. 2 incidents is hardly enough to make anything concrete. We don't know what kind of long-term effects this transformation has on a person. I'd like to say that we won't get any more chances to test it, but Bradburn will use any tool at his disposal to get what he wants. She was right, of course. That was the problem. Walter Bradburn was a man whose personal code dictated that the end justified the means. So what was his angle? What did he want? Oh, Fanina, Leo muttered as the terrible truth finally clicked. He wants to be right. Now it was his turn to receive the attention of the room. Right about what? Naira prompted. Leo's stomach churned just thinking about what he was about to suggest, but it fit too perfectly not to say. He's said for years that Cyphus has a fractal problem. He's used that to push his own agenda with limited success. Most haven't taken it with the seriousness he's demanded, so he's forcing the issue. He's found a way to make the problem real, to make it too big to ignore. And then he's going to step in and save Cyphus from it by ejecting Nulfs from the bulb. What? The cry of disbelief was shared by everyone else in the room. Bradburn's exact words to me this morning were, Cyphus has a fractal problem because it has a native problem. Though they weren't his words, they still felt gross coming from his mouth. The Nolfs in the room all bristled, and they had every right to. Even the stoic giant that was the Dolahan's driver traded his normal emotional expressiveness of a rock for visible anger. It was awful to keep going, and Melissa must have noticed his hesitation, because she gave his hand a subtle squeeze. She didn't hold it long, but it was enough for Leo to find strength to continue. He said he wants to kick the Nolfs out of Cyphus, and that any Nolfs caught on Fractal were too dangerous to be left alive. He's setting up for a crackdown on a problem he's going to control. If he's found a way to turn people into monsters, then he's going to do it to promote his narrative. It's why he needed Naira to weaken the 13. It's why he's worked his way into a new position of security. It's what all of this has been building to. It's a grab for power, and he's stepping on Nolfs to get there, and you can bet he's setting them up to take the fall. He wants to run the city his way, and he doesn't care who gets hurt in the process. Seed Mother, Melissa breathed. Then she raised her voice. The summit! He's gathering all the remaining seats of power in the city so that he can prove that his problem is real. Renetta nodded, adding, They've already given him shares of their own military force in the name of security. All he needs to do is scare them with his monsters, and they'll give him the keys to the city if it keeps them safe. They're rich and comfortable. Our beloved Alchemancer here already has them all on edge. This is simply the tipping point. Corruption that ran right to the very heart of Cyphus. Leo felt sick. Not in the kind of way that brought on the necral cravings, but the kind of sickness that set in any time he took a life. The kind of gut-twisting bitterness that threatened to leave him paralyzed. He wouldn't let it have its way this time. We have to stop him, he said. The words came out naturally, driven by a conviction he rarely felt so strongly. This went beyond his duties as an officer of the law. This was something at the very heart of who he was. Leo had sworn an oath to protect and to serve, not out of belief in the political state, or out of obligation, or desire for a position of power or authority. No, he'd sworn that oath for a much simpler reason. He'd been taught at a very young age that he'd been given strong ears to listen for the cries for help from the people around him, that he'd been given sharp eyes to look for those who by fear or oppression were unable to cry out, that he'd been given a heart so that he could feel for the needs of those he met. It was ingrained in him because of his mother's training, and though it had been a slow-growing seed for all his life, yet it was in full blossom now. As frightening of a situation as this was, someone had to take a stand. Getting to his feet, he cleared his throat. So how do we stop him? He asked, putting the question to the entire group. The group was quiet for a moment, as everyone considered. Then, with her typical air of command, Renetta Dolahan broke the silence. By bringing the truth to light. The backroom deals, the corruption, the monsters, the attempted murders, and the actual murders, all of it. This drew a fast response from Ame, whose voice hung cold in the air. Do you intend to throw sparks to the wolves? Renetta's face settled into a knowing smile. No, love. Quite the opposite. Naira is the very wolf I want to throw Bradburn to. She turned her smile towards Naira, but the teacher didn't return it. Instead, Naira's gaze traveled to the corpse barely obscured by the oil-stained sheet. When she spoke, it wasn't in response to anyone in particular. So much blood has been spilled already in getting to this point. Then let his be the last, Renetta said. Naira turned to regard her with a sad smile, giving her signature deferential nod. I should like that very much. Melissa's voice broke out as she sat forward in her chair. Bradburn worked on the police force for decades. His friendship with Paddock was never hidden, so there has to be a paper trail. If only we knew a few detectives who'd been the target of various bribes and murder attempts recently. People like that would probably be particularly motivated to go digging up Bradburn's dirt. She reached out and gave Leo a playful punch to the waist. We have a little over 2 days before Bradburn makes his presentation at the summit, Renetta said, naturally settling into the role of moderator in this impromptu discussion. He's managed to amass a large security force through each of the remaining 13, but I am well aware how much money it takes to maintain a security force of any worthwhile size. That money has to come from somewhere. I suspect he targeted me for 2 reasons. I have money, and have consistently shown myself to be sympathetic to Nulfs, both through my hiring habits and my personal life. He wouldn't want someone like me on the surviving council, because I would be a voice of dissent. My funds, however, would be quite useful to him, and I have little doubt he's doing his best to get his grubby little fingers on them. Unfortunately for him, I've been quite good at locking them down. Unfortunately for us, he's probably managed to seize the accounts of our dead friend Paddock here. So in all your investigating, I would suggest following the money. Funding an army is not cheap, and it's got to come from somewhere. As the still living Minister of Labour, I know the right people to contact to freeze any money we find. She said it with enough detachment and matter-of-factness that Leo shivered in spite of himself. Here was a woman who made more money in a day than he'd make in his life, who employed more people than would ever come through his precinct, and who acted in full knowledge that she was the most important person in the room. They exceed whether that she was on their side in all this mess. "And if we find something," he asked, "we arrest him?" "I present the findings at the summit, actively discredit him among the other 13, remind them that I am very much alive, and therefore still an equal member with them, show that he's tried to have me killed multiple times, that he's the reason the others have died, turn them against him, and then, when the rug has been fully pulled out from under him, love, that's when you swoop in and arrest him. If he tries to buy off the judge, I will simply outbid him to ensure that he cannot escape justice. No one threatens me or my daughter and gets away with it." Naira looked up, startled. "He threatened Moira?" For the first time, Renetta actively hesitated to respond. She and her daughter shared a look, and at her mother's nod, Moira pulled an envelope from her pocket. "It's a ransom note," she explained with a grimace of embarrassment. "Supposedly the final one. Bradburn wants Naira to bring me to the summit, and to exchange me for her husband." Seed mother, Bradburn was thorough. "I can only imagine he thinks that killing my daughter will free up my funds for the plundering," Renetta said. "He is sorely mistaken." "May I?" Naira asked, extending a hand. At her prompting, Moira handed her the envelope. Naira practically tore it open. Her fingers creased the letter inside more and more with every line she read. By the end of it, she was quaking, though from rage or sorrow, Leo couldn't tell. Honestly, it was probably both. "It bears Elaine's scent," she said quietly. "A few days old, but it's there." Her eyes fixed upon Moira with schoolteacher intensity. "How long have you had this?" Moira's eyes said she wanted to shrink, but she sat up straight anyway. "We found it this morning, after leaving the hospital. Tazael gave it to us at your place." "Tazael? You saw my son today." "About that, Mrs. N," Naomi began, before laying out the story of their encounter and fight with Naira's son. When she'd finished, Renetta gave a small nod. "So we're not the only ones making plans to crash this summit, then?" "On that note," Rolf said, clearing his throat as the attention in the room turned to him, "while you guys were running around, I called the guys to see how they were doing. They didn't have a lot to say, but Siev said Taz is pushing a big protest concert at the Central Stadium. Since this is Taz we're talking about, you can bet there's going to be a lot of Nulfin teens and a lot of free fractal. And you'll never guess when it's scheduled." "Same day as the summit?" Naomi asked from where she sat in front of him. Rolf nodded. "Wouldn't be much of a protest if they were looking for attention with no government people around. So yeah, it's same place and roughly same time as the summit." "Seed mother, this is a Fyrum crystal waiting to crack and burst," Alme growled. Leo spoke up. "How big is big, Rolf?" "Big. Siev said people were eager after the last one we threw, so he's expecting hundreds, if not a few thousand." Naira grimaced. Then we need people on the ground to protect civilians from whatever Bradburn's planning. If he drops a few of those monsters in the crowd while everyone's on Fractal, Vanina, he only needs to drop a few of these crystals in there, and it'll turn into chaos. We need to be ready with Prism and Terum so that it doesn't turn into a bloodbath. And that's still not even considering how many people we're going to need to deal with Bradburn and his men. She turned to Renetta, asking, "How much force can you muster?" Renetta smiled. "More than most people realize. As I said, I know the cost of maintaining effective security. I won't attend this summit with anything less than everything at my disposal." "It's possible I can rally some help from the precinct," Leo said. "I know there's more than a few people there who didn't like how Bradburn ran things. I won't guarantee that anyone will volunteer for such a suicide mission, but I'll ask around anyway." Shooting him a smile, Melissa added, "I'll ask too. People are more likely to volunteer when the request comes from someone friendly." He snorted. "I'm a very friendly individual. During the second half of the day." She gave him another friendly punch to the ribs. Ignoring their exchange, Renetta took up the conversation once more. "Well then, we have 2 days to rally ourselves and protect this city. Seed Mother help us all." Seed Mother help them indeed. Oops. Went to take a drink of water and accidentally spilled a little bit on poor Riker. He has full dead weight in my lap, and he didn't even move when I splashed him with water. Poor guy. Sorry, bud. All right. 8:22. I think we got time for one more. Man, I know book 2 is shorter, but it really feels like it's flying. You guys remembering to keep your seatbelts on and arms and legs inside the vehicle at all times? Change the picture. No, this one's not a cliffhanger. We will be hitting the point where cliffhangers will be unavoidable soon, but right now, this one's not a cliffhanger. Chapter 48. Preparing for War. Pillows spilled to the side as Moira lifted the corner of the mattress. "I told you, Pips. I didn't take your little speaker." It was the same thing Naomi'd been saying ever since Moira had entered her friend's room. Moira didn't believe her. Who else would have taken it besides her friends? "Somebody took it." "Okay, sure. But it wasn't me or Rolf." Moira put the pillows back on the bed, checking each one as she did by thrusting her arm up to the elbow into each pillowcase. Nothing. The drawers, then. "I'm serious, Moira," Naomi said as Moira bounded over to the dresser. "I haven't seen it, but I promise you that we didn't take it." Shirts sprang up and spilled out as Moira flung open the first drawer. Her hands dug through until they found the bottom of the drawer, but her fingers still came away empty. She was about to close the drawer when she realized something. Staring at the pile she'd made, she asked, "You guys share shirts?" "What, you hadn't noticed?" "I just thought you guys had similar senses of fashion." Naomi grinned as she stepped up to lean on the dresser. "We do. But there's other benefits to sharing clothes. For one, it's cheaper. For two, I like the way loose clothing feels. For three, you smell each other everywhere you go. No such thing as being alone when you wear your partner on your sleeve." Moira narrowed her eyes. Please tell me it stops at shirts. Naomi's grin widened as she tapped a drawer near the top. "We keep our undergarments in here." She gave Naomi a wink. "Sometimes Rolf likes to wear my bras." Moira's urge to vomit was so strong she almost forgot why she'd come in the room in the first place. "You two are animals." Letting out a bark of a laugh, Naomi clapped Moira on the shoulder. I'm kidding, Pips. We share shirts and jackets, and occasionally pants. That's it. I know you don't think so, but we do have boundaries with each other. Seed Mother, you're still so gullible sometimes. With a sigh, Moira closed the drawer, her speaker still missing. I thought for sure you two were messing with me. Naomi held up her hands in a show of innocence. As expensive as that speaker is, I love messing with you, Pips, but I'd be terrified that I'd break it, and I couldn't do that to you. Only time I've ever touched it is when you've shared it. Moira scowled. Well, if you didn't take it, then I don't know who did. Naomi's lips cocked in a half smile as she clapped Moira's shoulder again. It's not like they sprouted legs and ran off. Come on, I'll help you look for it. Hours of searching Ame's place, and the portable speaker was nowhere to be found. None of the guards had seen anyone enter or exit Moira's room that shouldn't have been in there, and of course, her mother denied taking them. So when the time came for the group meeting, Moira and Naomi had to abandon their search and join the rest of the crew in Ame's garage. It was the same crew that had gathered around Minister Paddock's body 2 nights before, minus the 2 snops. Police Chief Leo and Detective Melissa were both absent, no doubt working on their part in this crazy plan. Table space had been cleared for quite an assortment of homemade gear. The special suits Naira and Tigra had worn during their fight were on display with more suits like them. If there wasn't one in Moira's size, she would be protesting at painful volumes. Guns, bullets, crystals, and canisters were all neatly arranged on the various tables, and some of the higher-ups amongst her mother's security force were already perusing these. Ame stood next to Marston, her body supported by the electrum-powered hydraulic metal legs she used while working on vehicles. The hips glowed with blue energy, and her eyes maintained a steady prismatic glow. She held out a bullet to Marston. Modified hollow point rounds. There's a bit of prism, terum, and curum inside each one. Shoot someone with them, and the bullet will flatten and lodge inside the body. More importantly, the alchemantic portions will be crushed and activate immediately. Shoot one of those monsters with these, and it should calm them down, though I'd still recommend using them sparingly. If you cause them too much pain or damage, they might attack you anyway. And remember, it's still a bullet. Shoot someone in the right spot and you'll kill them, no matter how fast the prism and curum activate. Marston held it up to an electrum light mounted above the table, turning the bullet in his fingers. Now that sounds like a good use of alchemancy. Moira rolled her eyes. Over the last few weeks of training, Marston had struggled with Naira's alchemantic lessons. Rather than continue working at it until he'd gotten it to click, he'd given up and doubled down on what he knew. So of course getting handed a bullet that did over half the work would excite him. Ame also looked annoyed at his comment, and she didn't try to hide it as she replied, Yes, I figured this was simple enough for you and your brutes to make use of without hurting yourselves. Though Marston was still jumpy around the gnolls, his dislike of them had faded with the past few weeks of being sheltered by them. His open disdain had settled into a grudging respect, and it showed when he didn't take offense at Ame's answer. Instead, he actually leaned into the jab, though he didn't smile. Marston probably assumed smiling equated to weakness or dereliction of duty. Then he asked, How many of these special rounds do we have to work with? Ame snorted. Considering our proximity to the outside world and your boss's unlimited budget, a steady coffee diet helped me and Naira pull enough hours to make a dent. There's not enough for everyone, but based on the numbers you gave me earlier, you should have about 30 rounds per squad. You can squabble over them however you see fit. That's not a lot. Well, you can supplement with real bullets. Again, with your boss's unlimited budget and existing supplies, I've little doubt you've got enough ammunition to shoot everyone at the summit, if it came to it. He grimaced. I hope it doesn't come to that. Anything else? Ame walked behind him, her actual legs strapped tightly to the artificial ones granting her movement. It was a stilted, unnatural-looking walk, but it was clearly practiced, and she moved at a pace that matched her natural height. The whirring of gears and crackle of electricity were in themselves almost rhythmic to Moira's sensitive ears. Her own curiosity led her to follow the pair as Ame picked up the next item of interest, a metal canister that looked like a half-sized can of spray paint with a pin through the top. prism grenades, Ame explained. Works similar to tear gas, but dilutes in the air much faster. Don't expect it to have the coverage of tear gas, but it will last for at least a couple minutes. Should be useful if you encounter several monsters at once and are already worked up. The hope is that it pacifies your targets. If not, well, then I hope it at least serves as a distraction. Quantity? 3 per squad. Again, we have easy access to Prism, but the time crunch was the limiting factor. Marston nodded, examining one of the grenades for himself before setting it back with the others. Madame Dolahan's going to keep you on payroll after this, right? We could use someone like you to give us an edge. Giving him a flat stare, Ame blew through her nose. I'm a mechanic and an inventor, not a military engineer. I'm helping because it would be catastrophic if I didn't. Don't expect to see me again when this is all over. Marston looked back at her with his characteristic too serious expression, then shrugged. Madame Dolahan's got the kind of personality that sucks people in. I'm quite sure that if we survive this, she'll stay in touch. Only as much as it takes to solidify my retirement, Ame said. Glancing over the tables again, she added, That's all the special equipment we have for you and your men. I assume you can pass on my instructions to them. He nodded and thanked her. Shaking her head, her reply was solemn. Don't thank me unless it helps you survive. Then her gaze fell on Moira. Something about her expression softened just a little, and she beckoned with a free hand. Karana, come! Karana. It was the same thing that Sergei called her. She'd still never gotten an actual translation out of him, though. Ame using the name had to be either conspiracy between them or incredible coincidence. Moira followed her back to the other end of the garage. Naira and Tigra teased each other nearby, while Naomi and Rolf poked through the various tools set out on the table. All right, Ame announced, gathering them as a group. Let's start with the suits. Pulling one from the rack, she held it up for everyone to see. Mask in the front feeds from a prism tank in the back. See this little tube in the mask? That goes in your mouth. Just tuck it in your cheek. Open the valve on the tank and bite into the tube. There's a check valve in there to prevent leakage, so you only get prism for as long as you keep pressure on the tube. That way, you only use as much as you need. Make sense? After receiving nods from everyone, she flipped the suit around. You've got room for 2 batteries in the back. The batteries are all the same size, so you can use any type of reaction you want. The lines in the suit will direct the reaction out to your hands. Use your thumb to squeeze these little buttons on the side of your index fingers, and you'll open the batteries. Left hand goes to the left battery, the right hand goes to the right. Release the button, and the battery closes. The first time you activate a battery, keep the thumb button depressed until you can sense the reaction. From then on, you can just press and hold whenever you need to pull on the battery. Transferring the suit to one hand, she gestured to a table with stacks of batteries, each about as long as Moira's forearm, but only half as thick. Each stack was color-coded and meticulously labeled. Thanks to our generous benefactor, we've got quite the selection of batteries for you guys to work with, and it's all high-grade stuff. We added additional metal shielding to the suits as an extra layer of protection for the user, but you're still going to feel warm if you're stressing Firem, or cold if you're stressing Aquam, and so on. Down in the legs, there's pockets for additional batteries, 2 per leg. Tigra, you're a behemoth, so that count is doubled for your suit. There was even room on yours for a second prism tank, so you're going to have no excuse if you botch the fight. Tigra grinned. Twice the man, twice the fighting of the man. We'll bring back suit empty. Ame shook her head with a smirk. Yes, big guy, I'm sure you will. Now, let's make sure we tailored these right. Flipping the suit back around, she beckoned Naomi over with a finger. This one's yours, Panala. Sparks, why don't you help Ombidia since you have identical suits? Big guy, help Karana. Giving nods of understanding, Naira and Tigra both grabbed suits off the racks and stepped aside with their respective charges. As she took the proffered suit, Moira was pleased to see that it indeed came in her size. Undoing the front zipper, she stepped into the suit. She really doesn't like using people's real names, does she? Moira asked as she pulled one leg taut, then the other. Tigra crouched beside her, his enormous hands helping her find the sleeves, His lips curled back to reveal fangs as he smiled. To her, those are the real names. She has given you a name from her own language. It's compliment. Means she likes you. Okay, but what do they mean? Feels really weird to be called something and have no idea what it means. She has not explained? Moira shook her head, her fingers stretching out and filling the left glove. Tigra helped her pull on the right glove, then continued. Banala is no word for Lady of Snow. Naomi, Lady of Snow. Even her nickname was cool. Ombidia mean bison, because he is strong and thick of skull. Tigra laughed at his own joke with a deep and hearty laugh that rebounded through Moira's body. Moira zipped up her suit. And Karana? Means thunder. Moira frowned, her body jostling as Tigra adjusted the straps running over her shoulders. Thunder? Why thunder? Because Korana always follows Salatra. Salatra? That was the name they used for Naira. I still don't get it. Tigra's grin widened. Salatra is strike of lightning. So where you find lightning, thunder is not far behind. He said the last part with a wink. Cute. A wave of annoyance washed through her mind, but it was dulled by the realization that it wasn't really a bad thing. She'd learned so much from Naira in the past month. Of course she'd followed her everywhere. If people didn't like how much she hung out with Naira, she'd thunderclap them right across the mouth, provided they stooped down so she could reach it. Seed Mother. Interactions with Tigra always reminded her how short she was. Looking down at her hands, Moira tested her range of motion within the suit. The tank on her back put weight on her shoulders, but all the straps helped adjust the weight until it was more evenly distributed between her shoulders and her hips. She tried the thumb buttons, and they were easier to press than she'd imagined. There were no batteries to draw on just yet, but she made note to be gentle. Try walk around, Tigra said. Anywhere pinch, pain, rub wrong. Moira walked in a small circle. The weight on her back felt little different from the overstuffed backpack she usually took to school. Any pinching she felt was quickly remedied by adjusting the right straps. Once they'd worked out all the kinks, she gave Tigra a thumbs up, and the big man gave her a fist bump. It was like a baby fist bumping their parent, but as in most things he did, he was gentle. His grin was infectious too, and no sooner had he stood up to don his own suit than Moira was already bouncing in place. She was eager to give the suit a test drive, unable to decide which battery she wanted to use. By the time the adults had suited up, she knew she wanted Aurum for one hand, and was narrowing down her options for the other. While she perused the batteries on the table, Ame called her back to the group. We'll let you test in a few minutes, Karana, but there's a few more things we need to go over first. With great reluctance, Moira set down the Aurum battery she'd already picked up, and rejoined the line of suited-up Alchemancers. Ame continued. After observing your practice sessions, I've made additional enhancements to each of your suits that are custom-tailored to your habits and preferences. For the two Electrum junkies, I took heavy inspiration from the climbing suit I made for Sparks. Like that suit, there are compact electromagnets embedded in your palms and boots, which you can activate with Electrum. There's also another magnet embedded along your forearms. Each side has a special plating that springs out when you activate the magnet. The magnetic field it produces is designed to slow and stop incoming metal, since I'm expecting you to be walking into a wall of bullets and batons. The plating is reinforced so that bullets that have enough momentum to push through the field are still stopped before reaching your body. Now, it's not powerful enough to draw bullets that are being shot at other people. You need to be roughly in the bullet's path for it to be drawn into the magnetic field you're producing. Rolf was already running his fingers along the slot in his suit where this plating was stored. Have you tested it? Before Ame could respond, Naira spoke up. I've tested the concept before. This ought to work much better than what I did. While Moira didn't find that exactly reassuring, she did trust Naira. Rolf seemed to accept the answer too. Ame turned to Tigra. Alright, big guy. For you, we installed additional lines from your batteries down to your boots, so you can concentrate Aurum reactions at your hands and your feet. You've probably also noticed the hooks at your ankles, your hips, and midway down your ribcage. Hook your ankles together and your arms into your sides, and you'll pull out a thin membrane. Tigra did so, and the gap between his legs was filled with something like a dark sheet. Similar fabric stretched from his hands and arms down to his hips, almost turning his arms into something like bat wings. "Is like squirrel," he said excitedly as he admired the fabric. "Basically," Ame said with a nod. "I'm not sure how much lift you'll be able to get with your density, but you should at least be able to glide. Not sure how much lift you'll be able to get with your density, but you should at least be able to glide with the assistance of Aurum." Then she turned to Naomi. "Yours is more subtle, Panala. The heavy raised portion on the back of your hands? There's a series of steel spikes in there that are spring-loaded to keep them retracted. However, there's an air pocket behind them with a direct line to your batteries. Fill that space with ice and expand it, and you'll extend the spikes. I suggest making a fist when you do, so you don't accidentally skewer the back of your fingers, as the spikes will stick out to about your first knuckle. There's a similar setup lining the underside of your boots. Fill the air pocket in your boots with ice, and you've got instant cleats. Remove the ice and the springs, and your own body weight will force the spikes to retract. As much as you like to coat surfaces in ice while you fight, I figured a little traction might be of use to you." Balancing on one foot, Naomi gave an excited nod as she looked at the rows of holes. "Okay, that's pretty cool." Naira and Rolf got little shields to stop bullets and weapons. Tigra got to be a living kite. Naomi got steel claws for her hands and feet. What was she going to get? Moira looked over every part of her suit that she could see, trying to guess where her unique modification came in. "Yours is in your mask, Karana," Ame said as her attention settled on Moira. Her mask? It dangled from an elastic cord around her neck, forgotten in her excitement. Pulling it out, she turned it over in her hands and examined it. All the other masks were partial, designed to cover just the muzzle and nose. The more Moira examined hers, the more it resembled a full helmet, complete with portions to rest inside her ears. There were holes near the mouth, too, though they didn't seem to go all the way through the mask. It looked almost like a speaker? "What's it do?" she asked. "Two things. As you are the audio specialist among us, that's the direction Naira and I took your suit. With as sharp as your hearing is, those ear flaps will help to dampen things like gunshots and aurum bursts." "So I get earmuffs?" Ame smirked. "If you don't want them, don't use them." "No, it sounds helpful, but everyone else got something tied to reactions, so I was just hoping for something cooler." That drew a snort from the older Nolf, who rested her arms in a soft cross. "Well, you interrupted me before I could finish." "Sorry," Mura muttered. "What else does it do?" "See the slot under the jaw? That's for small electron batteries, like your cassette player uses. It provides power to the special amplifiers in the ear flaps. They amplify sounds outside of the range of hearing that Nolfs use, and should make it easier to pick up whatever frequencies you normally hear when you listen to magic. It also powers the megaphone built into your mouthpiece." Moira blinked. "Megaphone? How strong?" "Think of all the times you've heard someone obnoxious hop on a megaphone at a sporting event or a rally or a protest, and step it up a few notches. If you've ever been deafened by the speakers at a concert, you're getting warmer. It's another reason you're going to want those earmuffs, so you don't deafen yourself." Her lips twisted in a sly grin. "Sparks and I figured that if your singing was what let you influence magic, then we needed to make sure your voice could carry. Seed Mother gave you a small frame, so this is going to make sure that you get heard, no matter your surroundings." Moira turned the mask over in her hands again, running a thumb along the holes of what she'd correctly identified as a speaker. Though now she found herself suspicious of where Ame had procured said speaker. "Is that going to be cool enough for you, Karana?" Nodding eagerly, Moira squeezed one of the ear flaps, feeling the bump of the amplifier sewn into the fabric. Something tickled at the back of her mind. Something that had held her attention for a few moments before it got drowned out by the helmet in her hands. "Oh. You mentioned my cassette player, Ame. Naira said you had it?" "All right, time for the next exhibit," Ame said, clapping her hands together and heading towards the next table past the batteries. There was no way she hadn't heard Moira's question, as evidenced by the look Naomi shot her. Her friend had picked up the dismissal, too. Moira would have to press Ame again. For now, she fell in line with everyone else and joined Ame at the next table. This one was clearly lined with weapons, and that filled Moira with fresh excitement.
You have teacher's rifle?
Tigra asked, laying his hand reverently on one of the longer guns. Over a third of the gun disappeared under his oversized mitt, and Moira doubted his finger was small enough to use the trigger. Old man left it to me before he passed, Ame said, looking down at the gun. We've since rekitted it for Sparks. We're giving you that one, big guy, and we've decided to call it the Tiger Cannon. Tigra followed her pointing finger to a gun that looked more like a t-shirt cannon than a gun. It was short for its size, with a barrel so large Moira could probably stick her entire arm inside. The big man's eyes gleamed with delight as he scooped it up in one hand. Is gun made for me? With how few things come in your size, we figured you could use one. Tigra will treasure forever, Ame snorted. Until you come crawling back begging me to fix it because you broke it. The thing uses crystals the size of my fist, Tigra, so it's gonna have one fanina of a kick. He nodded, rotating the gun to run his fingers along the inside of the barrel. Turning back towards the table, Ame barked, Hey! No. I just said that one's for Sparks. Rolf, who had been about to bring the rifle up to his shoulder, sheepishly and gingerly laid it back on the table. That's an heirloom, Ame nearly hissed, picking up something shaped like a pistol and handing that to him instead. As with all the guns on this table, the barrel was oversized, testament to the fact that you loaded it with alchemic crystals rather than bullets. These are for you two, she said, handing an identical-looking pistol to Naomi. We're sending you in with high-grade crystals, some of the best materials I've ever worked with. I know you've been spoiled with bare-handing low-grade things, but if you try that with these crystals, you will lose a finger or worse. So don't be lazy. If you're going to use magic beyond what's coming from your suit, then use your catalyst to do it. The bismuth can take the temperature and pressure changes that your fragile, fleshy fingers cannot. What about those? Naomi asked, pointing to another set of long guns laid out on the table. These weren't the same shape as the rifle, though Moira didn't know enough about guns to know what type it was. The shotguns are for the snips. The shotguns are for the snops. They aren't as experienced with casting as you guys, so they get training wheels. That said, they're both quite proficient with firearms, so these are more like training wheels with an engine strapped on. Trust me, your catalyst will be dangerous enough for anything you need to do. Which brings me to an important point. I realize I'm harping on this, but these are high-grade crystals. Get something close enough to the end of your catalyst as the reaction is going off, and it could be lethal. Yes, you guys are still going to be able to shape it, and the reaction strength will diminish with distance, but these aren't any different from handing you a loaded gun. These are weapons, and I expect you to treat them as such. Having counted all the guns laid out on the table, Moira realized that the numbers didn't quite add up. Where's mine? She asked. Your catalyst isn't the gun, Ame said, turning to her with a look of thinly veiled disappointment. What? Moira didn't have a right to cool weapons? Then what is it? In response, Ame opened a small drawer on the side of the table and produced a familiar object. My cassette player! Ame nodded, holding it out to Moira. Almost immediately, Moira hugged it to her chest, like a parent being reunited with her child. Then her eyes narrowed in suspicion. What did you do to my baby? Upgraded it, Ame said, as if reconstructive surgery on Moira's beloved cassette player was a trivial and unconcerning pastime. Standing off to the side, Naira was hiding a smile. Then it clicked for Moira. You took it from my room. Naira gave her typical respectful nod, which only deepened Moira's annoyance. Not trusting herself to say anything nice, Moira turned her attention to the cassette player in her hands. It didn't look all that different, though there was a new row of buttons running along the top of the player. Pressing the largest of these revealed a new compartment, built above where you inserted the tapes and clearly designed to house a single crystal of the same size as Rolf and Naomi would be using. Pressing the next button over activated a piston that snapped forward in the chamber. That would be to activate the crystal after it was loaded. And the third button? Testing it proved it to be an ejection system to clear out spent crystals. What do you think? Naira asked. Maria considered for a moment, scrunching her lips as she asked, "It still plays my music, right?" Ame laughed. "From the tape and from the crystal. You can listen to either or both as you see fit." Giving a small nod, it was hard to keep a smile from creeping onto her face. Yes, she was still upset they'd touched her stuff without asking, but they'd also given her a new way to listen to magic. "We ready to take stuff out into the yard for testing?" Ame asked. Moira's smile turned into an unashamed grin. Yes, she was very ready for testing.